Metroidvanias have a reputation for being dense, mysterious, and sometimes overwhelming, but what if we broke the genre down into levels of mastery, starting with simple, accessible experiences and climbing towards the most complex, demanding, and acclaimed examples ever made? Today, we're looking at 7 indie Metroidvanias that represent that ascent, each one adding new layers of mechanics, design, and depth. By the time we reach the top, you'll see exactly how far the genre can go and why so many players get hooked on its blend of exploration and discovery. At the base level sits SteamWorld Dig, an approachable entry point that teaches the fundamentals without overwhelming the player. You control Rusty, a steam-powered robot who receives the deed to his uncle's mine, moving to the town of Tumbleton, and quickly realizes that digging down reveals both treasure and danger. The gameplay loop is simple but compelling, where you dig through dirt, collect ore and gems, return to town and buy upgrades that allow you to dig more efficiently, carry more, or to purchase various mobility upgrades. Each improvement, such as a better digging device or lantern, allows you to go deeper into the mine and expands your options when it comes to exploration, with the introduction of new hazards such as falling rocks or acid pools adding to the danger. However, the learning curve is smooth enough for new players, and small caveat, it might be considered more of an action platformer with Metroidvania elements rather than a full Metroidvania, being fairly linear with minimal backtracking, but that is exactly why it's here in this spot. Despite being an older title, the cartoony visuals are timeless and still holds up, with the simple but effective risk-reward decisions being key, since you do lose all gathered materials if you get too greedy and overextend yourself and end up losing all hit points. But punishment is not that severe in the grand scheme of things. I do love the SteamWorld universe as well, with this having a sequel which is bigger and better, but for a simple level 1 kind of experience, this is the perfect game. Climbing to the second level, we have Time Spinner, a game that feels like a love letter to the classics while carving its own path through clever mechanics. You step into the role of Lunais, a time-building heroine who is swept across timelines after a devastating attack on a quest for revenge against the empire that killed her family. The focus shifts from a simple resource gathering loop to more of a traditional interconnected map filled with secrets, locked passages, and combat encounters that require more precision. The standard mechanic is the ability to freeze time, turning enemies into stepping stones or momentary platforms that reshape how you approach traversal. This single twist deepens exploration and adds puzzle-like moments to the flow of combat and movement, which does extend to boss fights as well. Combat is more involved, where you're using customizable orbs that alters her attacks and allows for experimentation across melee and ranged options. Bosses are larger, faster, and more punishing, demanding pattern recognition and clever use of abilities. It also has a dual timeline structure where changes in the past ripple into the present, unlocking shortcuts or treasures in surprising ways, which does feed into the narrative as well. It has a darker, more emotional tone to the tale, with themes of loss, destiny, and rebellion, with some gorgeous pixel art where it echoes Castlevania Symphony of the Night in more ways than one, such as with how the enemy names pop up on screen when you first land a hit on them. As compared to SteamWorld Dig, this is a larger experience that grows in scope and ambition, taking lessons from the past while still doing its own thing, and was somewhat of a miracle that this got made, taking over 8 years, and there's a sequel in development as well. At level 3, we have Guacamelee Super Turbo Championship Edition, one of my favourite Metroidvanias of all time, as you explore a colourful, vibrant Mexican folklore-inspired world. You play as Juan, a humble agave farmer who becomes a masked luchador hero in order to save his childhood friend and El Presidente's daughter from the evil skeleton cowboy Carlos Calaca. The mood shifts from the quiet melancholy of Time Spinner into something loud, colourful, and chaotic, What makes Guacamelee so memorable is its combat system, which is heavily inspired by Lucha Libre as you chain punches, throws, slams, headbutts, and other special moves. Instead of firing a gun or using swords and whips, you're able to learn special moves from the Chuzu statues, which themselves are a callback to Chozo statues from Metroid, learning moves like the Rooster Uppercut to launch enemies into the air, but this can also break red blocks in the environment, which allows you to access new areas. This also has two dimensions of the parallel land of the living and the land of the dead, allowing you to switch between the two, which factors into platforming as well as combat, where safe ground and hazards flicker in and out of existence, and where certain enemies remain invulnerable until you switch dimensions. It demands faster reactions and sharper thinking than the previous games, with the presentation matching the energy, having art bursting with life, a lively soundtrack, and plenty of references and tongue-in-cheek humor. The endgame platforming challenges were an absolute joy, not Celeste precision platforming levels of difficult, but still considerable, and maybe it's the wrestling fan in me, but the theme just works, turning the more methodical pace of exploration into an energetic fiesta of combos, dimensions, and pure spectacle. Level 4 takes us into the strange, unsettling world of Axiom Verge, a game that pays tribute to the genre roots of Super Metroid, but again, with its own twist. You play as Trace, a scientist who wakes up in a hostile alien world armed with nothing but a gun and his wits. At first glance, it looks like a retro throwback, with pixelated graphics and eerie soundscapes, but quickly reveals a depth that pushes the genre into new territory. The most striking weapon is the glitch gun, or address disruptor, where you fire out a cone of rectangles which interacts with blocks or enemies in unique ways. You can change enemy behavior, reveal hidden paths, or alter the environment in ways that feel both unexpected and deliberate, allowing you to glitch through barriers, for example, which opens up so many possibilities. This mechanic flips the usual rules of exploration on their head, so poking and prodding around becomes even more important. It has over 20 weapons and tools scattered throughout its labyrinth, from drones you can remotely control to a grappling hook, adding more of a cerebral layer to it since you have to choose the right tool for the right situation. Again, I love the pixel art here, which is very Metroid for obvious reasons, with some of the giant boss designs in particular looking absolutely gorgeous. However, like Metroid, you might get lost in this world with its sprawling map, but the game has confidence in you to explore and experiment, which reinforces the sense of discovery, which is the most important thing to me in games. Unlike the more light-hearted tone of Guacamelee, this is more mysterious and cryptic, where the narrative hints at a deeper lore to uncover. The difficulty curve is steeper, with some bosses requiring precision and multiple tries, but it never feels unfair, taking the familiar Metroid blueprint but layering on new mechanics, resulting in a game that demands more creativity, persistence, and adaptability, which is a clear step up in both challenge and ambition. Reaching level 5 brings us to Ender Lily's Quietus of the Night, a hauntingly beautiful Metroidvania that blends emotional storytelling with demanding combat. You play as Lily, a young priestess who awakens in a kingdom consumed by a cursed rain that has twisted its inhabitants into monsters. One of the most interesting aspects is that our heroine does not fight enemies directly, instead calling upon the spirits of fallen warriors to fight on her behalf. Each spirit adds a different attack, from sword strikes to ranged projectiles, and collecting them expands your repertoire into a diverse toolkit, creating a flexible combat style where you can equip different spirits to match your preferred approach. Explore gothic landscapes filled with hidden relics, branching paths, and environmental storytelling, unlocking new traversal options after every boss encounter. Combat is challenging, with boss fights ramping up in intensity more so than the previous title, which requires mastery of both Lily's movement and the strengths of your chosen spirits. There are also relics to choose from, which modify stats and abilities, with a limited number of slots, so you have to pick and choose. Beyond mechanics, the presentation is stunning. Hand-drawn visuals drapes the world in a certain apocalyptic sadness, while the ethereal soundtrack amplifies the atmosphere of loss and resilience. It represents a maturation of the genre, expecting mastery of combat systems, exploration, and emotional investment, resulting in a richly layered experience that lingers long after the final battle, moving beyond accessibility and into artistry. At level 6, we enter the brutal world of Blasphemous, a game that combines Metroidvania structure with Souls-like intensity. You play as the Penitent One, a silent warrior wandering through Custodia, a land steeped in grotesque religious imagery inspired by the Catholic faith in his never-ending battle against the Miracle, a supernatural, almost divine force responsible for many of the events of the game. Of course, the stunning pixel art takes center stage, which is contrasted with the brutality of the combat and execution animations. Beneath the aesthetics lies punishing combat that requires precision and endurance, being deliberate but stopping just short of adding in a stamina meter where each swing of your sword carries weight and requires careful timing. Enemies hit hard and bosses hit harder, forcing you to learn their patterns and seize narrow openings. Mistakes here are punished harshly, reinforcing the game's tone of suffering and redemption. Exploration mirrors the challenge with traps, environmental puzzles, and hidden secrets scattered throughout the map. Progression comes not only from upgrades to health and abilities, but also through prayers, relics, and rosary beads that alter your capabilities. These layers of customization adds depth to the combat system as you think about what to equip going into any particular area or encounter. While there is lore and a story, it is told in a manner similar to Dark Souls, more through item descriptions and interacting with dead bodies to witness their memories instead of explicitly narrating it to you. But don't worry, there are lore videos on YouTube breaking it down if you don't want to go hunt them down for yourself. Its position here is due to the ramp up of difficulty, challenge, and brutality, making you endure the punishment just like the titular character, and man, does it feel great when you triumph. Hollow Knight is widely considered to be one of the greatest Metroidvanias ever created and the ultimate expression of what the genre can achieve. You guide a small, silent knight through Hello Nest, a vast underground kingdom of insects, ruins, and hidden histories. The map is enormous and interconnected, with each new area distinct in design, enemies, and atmosphere. You unlock new abilities like an air dash, ground pound, wall jump, and more, not only expanding movement but also reshaping combat strategies. You have a variety of charms to discover and use, which can drastically change your build, from a spell-casting focused knight to a survivability build emphasizing healing and brawling with the sword. And it's even worth rejigging your configuration depending on the enemies and bosses you face. The haunting atmosphere is supremely well done and again does have cryptic storytelling where you need to decipher clues to figure it out as you get sucked into the backstory and want to find out more about what happened, representing the cumulation of everything that makes the genre what it is. It is demanding yet fair, enormous yet purposeful, and endlessly rewarding to those who dive into its depths. It's the peak of indie Metroidvanias for now, until I get my bearings with regards to Silksong, where the ascent to another level is the story there. Metroidvanias are only one piece of the indie landscape, and there are so many more games worth your time, so if you want to see the best of the decade so far, you can watch my breakdown right here.